Cool.
This meeting is being recorded.
Right then. How you doing, Sarah? Never know.
Sorry, yeah, good. Just my phone's not working very well. Yeah, I'm
All
all
right,
right.
no stress. Good stuff. Okay, right, I'm going to share my screen. Uh, just put actually, Wendy, you can just give me a thumbs up if you can you see my slides? No? Okay, well, just put a 1 in the group chat if you can see my slides. Can you see them now? Cool. All right, good stuff.
Yeah, they're there now.
Cool, thank you very much. All right. And then I'm just going to record this for everyone else who can't make it. All right. Good evening, team. Well done for those of you who've made it along live, and those of you who are catching up later, well done as well for taking time to catch up on what you missed. Obviously, right now, if you're in Europe, we are experiencing some pretty unprecedented temperatures for June, which carries with it its own challenges with regards to wherever you are in your fitness journey, especially if you're trying to lose weight. But even if right now your goal is more focused around building strength or trying to improve your performance, trying to train in this heat and trying to sleep in this heat is pretty challenging. So I wanted to give you guys some tools and some understanding around how heat is going to affect you and how to overcome that best, given the situation. All right, so first of all, is it going to work? Is my slide deck going to do anything? There we go. All right. So what does heat and humidity do to us? Obviously, our bodies are built to only kind of work in a narrow range of conditions. You know, we've not evolved to deal with absolute extremes, which is why when we're in very, very cold environments, we can die, and when we're in very, very hot environments, we can die. There's a narrow band of safe working environments in which our body can exist and function. And as we move towards one extreme or the other, we're either getting too hot or getting too cold or getting too humid or getting too dry. Our body has to work harder in order to maintain homeostasis. So when we start to get too hot, or when the humidity rises, because our body wants to stay at around 37 degrees core temperature, our body has to work harder to try and get rid of heat in an environment that is already hot, which means we have to sweat in order to try and evaporate heat away from us. Our blood vessels have to dilate more in order to try and get blood closer to our skin surface in order to radiate heat away, which means our heart has to work harder in order to pump blood to those blood vessels in our skin. All these things put a lot of stress on the body. And the thing with training is the reason why training works, the reason why exercising works, is because it puts stress on the body, and our body adapts to that stress in order to get stronger or in order to deal with different stimulus. So if our body is already dealing with the stress of just the environment, the fact that we're hot, the fact that it's humid, adding additional stress from our training can sometimes be too much. It can be overwhelming for our body. It can be too stressful. It decreases our VO2 max, which is how much oxygen our body is able to supply to our cells. Our core temperature rises, as I mentioned. Our heart has to work harder, and all of these things mean that we have less resources available for our working muscles. So if we're then trying to lift weights or run or do a HIIT workout, then we have less blood, less oxygen going to those muscles, and therefore it's going to feel more challenging for us. So the main way our body tries to overcome a hot environment is to sweat. So as our body releases water onto the surface of our skin, that sweat starts to evaporate. And in order for the sweat to evaporate, it has to take energy from us. It has to take heat energy from us in order to break free and evaporate into the environment. However, the problem with humidity is that water can only evaporate from your skin. Sweat can only evaporate from your skin if there is space in the air for it to fit. All right. If you think about all these little water molecules sitting on the surface of your skin, they can only evaporate into the air if there is space for the water molecules to fit. And obviously, when we look around, we don't really think of air as containing stuff. We sort of look around, it just looks like empty space. But when the humidity is high, it actually means that all around us, the air is full of water molecules already. And therefore, there's nowhere for those water molecules sitting on our skin to go. And if there's nowhere for them to go, they can't evaporate and they can't draw heat away from our body. So that is why you'll often hear people talking about, oh, dry heat and humid heat, and how it's fine if it's dry heat and it's horrible if it's humid heat. And there is a lot of truth in that. And that's because when it's dry heat, although it may be very, very hot, as long as there's still space in the air for those water molecules to evaporate into, then we can still cool down. So even if it's 40 degrees out there, if the humidity is very low, our sweat can evaporate and it can cool us down in the process. If we're in 30-degree heat, but it's 100% humidity, our sweat can't evaporate, and therefore our ability for sweat to cool us down is pretty much none. So the other way our body can, or one of the other ways our body can release heat into the atmosphere, is to pump blood to the surface of your skin, and then it radiates out, just like a radiator in your house. The heat will radiate away from your skin. However, our blood at its core is about 37 degrees. So again, as the environment gets closer to that 37-degree mark, which it has been over the last couple of days, again, your body can't radiate heat into the environment if the environment is already the same temperature as your core. So in that situation, your body doesn't really have any way to cool down other than to cool yourself down in your environment. And that's where it becomes really important to put yourself in an environment where you can stay cool, so staying in the shade, and staying in air-conditioned areas, and also taking on fluids that are cooler than the environment. So yeah, sweating only works as long as there is space in the air to take that sweat, and radiating your heat only works as long as there is a lower environmental temperature than your core temperature. All right, so what about if you are a little bit overweight? As I mentioned, your core temperature is 30 to 37 degrees, but your surface temperature is less than that. Your skin is lower than 37 degrees. If you have more body fat, that is kind of like insulation covering the body. It's like putting on a woolly jumper. And so then your body isn't able to get that heat away from you because you're wearing this thick jacket of body fat. Therefore, if you are overweight, you are already at more risk of overheating because you have this insulation. Also, you have higher cardiovascular demands on your body because your heart is having to work harder in order to deal with all the extra body weight that you are dealing with. And so you're already adding stress on top of stress. So if you are carrying extra weight, you are at more risk when you're in a heat wave. So you do need to be aware of that. Equally, if you are trying to lose weight, that can also put extra stress on your body. Because remember that when you are eating in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight, you're not just getting fewer calories, you're getting fewer nutrients as well. And that means fewer electrolytes, less fuel coming in, and also quite possibly less water coming in, because a lot of the food we eat contains fluids. And so if you're eating less, you're probably taking on fewer fluids as well. Also, if you are trying to lose weight, you may be training a bit more, you may be doing extra steps, you may be exercising more, and those things, again, add extra stress. So if you're overweight, you're at risk. And if you're overweight and in a deficit and training hard, you're going to be at even more risk. So not saying don't do it, because obviously you're at risk from being overweight anyway, so you want to try and do something about that. But you do need to be aware, if you're trying to lose weight, you have to be aware of the added risks that you are under when it is hot. Okay, so first of all, you will acclimatize to the heat, but it normally takes between 7 to 14 days to adapt to that. And generally in the UK, you are probably only going to experience this sort of heat for like a week or two maximum anyway. So by the time the temperature has finally cooled down, you've probably not had the chance to cool. Sorry, by the time the temperature's cooled down, you've probably not had the chance to actually climatize to it. But your body will respond over the next sort of week or two. Your sweat response will be greater and faster. So your ability for your body to sweat will happen more readily, and you will sweat more. Your resting heart rate will lower it as well, which means less stress on your body. But that does mean that for the first couple of days, that is when you're at most risk. So if you do intend to keep training throughout this period, just know you might need to take a bit easier for the first few days and then start to ramp it up as your body acclimatizes naturally to the heat. Now, we've already talked a little bit about sweating and the importance, therefore, of hydrating. Not only does hydrating replace the sweat that you're losing, but it also, as I mentioned, if you're drinking cold drinks, that can help to lower your core temperature. So drinking ice water. But how much should you drink? This is going to vary a lot depending on your body size, depending on how active you are, and of course, depending on the environment. If it's hotter, you are going to probably sweat more, and therefore you're going to drink more. So first of all, number one rule, your body is going to give you cues about your thirst, about how much water you need. So if you feel thirsty, listen to that cue and make sure you're drinking. It's also a really great way, if you are trying to lose weight, it's a great way to curb your hunger, because often we will feel hungry when we're thirsty. And so if you deal with your thirst first, then you are less likely to then feel as hungry. So in terms of how much you should be drinking, a general rule of thumb is around 2 to 3 liters per day in normal circumstances. And that is because jump on the group chat and just mention a couple of ways that you think you might lose water from your body throughout the day. Because there's a few ways that you lose water from your body, and we're going to add it up to see how much water that actually totals when we add it all together. Carly's got it. Peeing, sweating. There's one more main one. Yeah, Windy's got, pee, sweat. There's one more. And again, this one's going to vary a lot depending on potentially depending on what you've eaten and how it's fared in Windy says crying. Yeah, hopefully not too much of that. It's actually in your feces. So the main way you're going to lose fluid throughout the day is actually from your pee. You'll lose about 1.5 liters just from your urine throughout the day. Then you will generally lose around 1 liter from your sweat, and then probably about 0.5 liter from your feces as well. So throughout the day, that comes to around about 2.5 to 3 liters. But it is going to depend a lot, again, depending on your environment. If it's in a hot environment, you're going to sweat more, and if you're drinking more, you're going to urinate more as well. So before exercising, because that is when you are going to lose the most, you're generally going to lose about 1 liter per hour when you're exercising, is a good rule of thumb, depending on how hard you're training and the environment you're training in. But you're going to lose somewhere in the region of 1 liter per hour if you're training hard. So throughout your training, try to replace your fluids at that rate, but your body won't actually be able to absorb the fluid at that pace. Your body can't absorb that liter within that amount of time and distribute it to all your cells. So it's really important to make sure that you are drinking in advance of your training to make sure you are properly hydrated before you train. So a good rule of thumb for that is around 5 to 10 milliliters per kilogram of body weight within 1 to 2 hours before you train. All right. So let's take an example. For me, I weigh about 80 kilograms. So I should be getting between 5 to 10 milligrams, 5 to 10 milliliters per kilogram, which would be in the region of 400 to 800 milliliters of water. All right. So take your body weight, multiply it by 5 to 10, and that is roughly how many milliliters of fluids you should have in the 1 to 2 hours before you train. Don't neck it all in one go, otherwise it'll probably go straight through and you'll end up pissing it out anyway. So 5 to 10 milliliters per kilogram of body weight beforehand, and then about 1 liter per hour during your training. It's also worth remembering that sweat weighs approximately 1 kilogram per liter. So if you weigh yourself before your training, and then you weigh yourself after your training, if you are down by a kilogram, bad news, you probably haven't lost a kilogram of fat just in that 1 hour of training. Sorry about that. But you probably have lost about a liter of fluids through your sweat. So that gives you an idea as well of then how much you need to replenish after your training as well. So if you haven't been doing a very good job of hydrating yourself during your training and you're a kilogram lighter after your training, make sure to get about a liter of water in afterwards. Hopefully that all makes sense. Do jump in on the group chat if anything confuses you or doesn't make sense as we go. My computer, unfortunately, is going very slow, because, I think because of the heat. So, electrolytes. Who takes electrolytes as a supplement? They're very trendy at the moment. Does anyone take electrolytes either regularly or occasionally? All right, Wendy, thanks. Carly says, only when I'm racing and training hard. Okay, so I guess if you're taking them, it's worth knowing what they actually are, right? It's worth knowing what you're putting into your body. So at their most basic level, electrolytes are just different types of salts. So the main ones being sodium, which is the same salt that you might put on your food or in your food. Potassium, which is another type of salt that you famously get from bananas, and magnesium and calcium as well, other salts that we need to get from our diet or from electrolytes. And they're really important because all of the functions within our body are triggered, especially within the brain, are triggered from electrical impulses. And plain water doesn't actually carry electricity very well. I know we always think of like water as being a really good conductor, and that's why you shouldn't take a bath with a toaster, because you'll end up cooking yourself. But actually, water, if it has nothing else in it, if it's just plain water, it doesn't actually conduct electricity very well, which means the electrical impulses inside our brain and inside our nerves can't travel very well unless that water has salts in it. You might remember back to like GCSE science. If you wanted to, pass electricity through water, it works really well if you stick the cathode and the anode in like a lemon or a potato, and that's because it's not just water. There's lots of other salts and electrolytes in there. And same if you mix some salt into some water, again, it works really well. And that's why it's so important for our bodies to have enough salts so that those electrical impulses can travel throughout our nerves the way they should. But too many electrolytes means it is not good for us, and too few electrolytes is also not good for us. So they need to be in a balance. And as we sweat, you may have noticed sometimes your sweat tastes salty, and that is electrolytes like salt coming out through your sweat when you're sweating, and therefore we need to make sure that we're replacing them. But if you're replacing your electrolytes and you're not replacing the water that was carrying them, then you can end up out of balance. You can end up with too many electrolytes for the amount of water in your body. Similarly, if you're taking on loads and loads of water, but you're not taking on enough electrolytes, then you can have the opposite problem. So it's really important to have this balance. Now, if you are eating a balanced diet and there's a reasonable amount of salt in your diet, and you're eating a reasonable amount of fruit which contains potassium and nuts which contain magnesium, and you're getting a good balance of different foods, you should get all of the electrolytes that you need through your diet. And supplementing it more is not going to make you more hydrated unless you are drinking more as well. So electrolytes are only beneficial if you're sweating out a lot of if you're sweating out a lot of electrolytes as well. And the amount of electrolytes that you sweat out is very variable from one person to the next. For some people, it might be 200 milligrams per liter of sweat. For other people, it could be 2,000 milligrams of electrolytes per liter of sweat. So there's a tenfold difference from one person to the next. So a good rule of thumb is, if you notice if your sweat is stinging your eyes, or when you exercise, you notice that your shirt always looks like it's covered in crystals of salt afterwards, you are probably one of those people who sweats a lot of electrolytes. If you don't have those issues, then you probably don't sweat a lot of electrolytes. And so you probably don't need as many. But in general, you should be getting enough from your from your diet, and you should only really be supplementing them if you are doing endurance sports such as endurance running, endurance cycling. You shouldn't really need them just to pop to the gym. Okay, so how much do you need? As I mentioned, you can get most of what you need from your diet, from potatoes, bananas, leafy greens, salt in your food. But if you are doing more than 60 to 90 minutes of intense exercise, that is where you might want to be thinking about adding extra electrolytes. And it doesn't have to be a fancy sachet that you've paid 10 quid for. It can literally just be some salt added to your water bottle, and maybe a little dash of fruit juice as well. All right, so you don't need to be spending a bunch of money on your electrolytes. You can just have a handful of salty nuts and a banana and wash it down with a liter of water, and you'll be fine. Okay, so moving on from electrolytes, just looking at nutrition in general during the heat. As I mentioned earlier, your food contains some amount of water in it as well. So try to favor foods that are higher in water content. Typically, that's going to be fruit and vegetables. Most highly processed foods don't contain much water because water makes foods not very shelf stable. All right, so things that are high in water are more likely to decompose, and therefore that's why highly processed food lasts for ages because typically it doesn't contain a lot of water. So stick to watermelon, cucumbers, fresh fruit, tomatoes. All these things are going to be really, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Really hydrating, and they're going to come with electrolytes built in as well. All right, so if you're getting some amount of your fluids from fruit and veg, you're going to be getting the electrolytes as well as the fluids that you need. Obviously, when it's hot, it's often hard to eat as much food. So do just be aware it may help you with your calorie deficit. So you might find it much easier not to eat very much when you are hot, but do just make sure as well that you are getting enough protein, enough fiber, and enough of all the vitamins and minerals that you need, right? So do keep an eye if you're not feeling as hungry, just make sure that you are getting enough of the things you need, particularly protein, fiber, and minerals. All right. How to adjust your training in this heat. Obviously, it's typically going to be much cooler in the morning. So if that means getting up a little bit earlier to train, that's a really good idea. Plus, if you are going to the gym, it should be air conditioned all day long. So this is a really good excuse. If you've been sitting on the fence about maybe joining a gym and you're really struggling to train at home, maybe this is the time to join a gym, go and enjoy their air conditioning. They're paying for it. So or I suppose if you join a gym and you're paying a membership, you're also paying for it. So, so you might as well go and make the best use of it. I went to the gym in the middle of the day today. I normally go in the evenings, but I went in the middle of the day just because it was too hot to work. So I went and did my workout in the middle of the day whilst it was, so I could take advantage of the aircon. And now I'm going to be working a bit later as the temperature drops. So you may also need to shorten your workouts, especially if you're doing high intensity workouts. So you could split them up throughout the day. So you could do a shorter session in the morning, shorter session in the evening. Or you may want to allow more time to rest in between sets so that you can cool down and you're not getting too hot. All right. So depending on what kind of workout you're doing, you may just need to add extra time or split it up throughout your day. Obviously, sometimes it is appropriate to skip a session altogether. Remember that your body is already under stress when you're in a calorie deficit. Your body is already under stress when you're training, and then adding heat to that situation as well may not be good for you. Remember that health and wellness is a holistic thing. It's not just about, there we go. All right. And then finally, another thing that can really make this whole process harder is how much heat can disrupt your sleep. Remember that when you don't sleep very much, your cortisol rises, and that is your stress hormone. So now we've got stress from the heat, we've got stress from your training and from your calorie deficit, and now we've got stress from the fact that you're not sleeping very well. All of these things can really impair your progress because maybe, well, firstly, that stress means you're more likely to store body fat.
you're less likely to grow new muscle tissue. And you may find as well when you're tired, you're less able to control your appetite. So you may find you are more likely to binge eat or end up making worse decisions about food. So all these things can make your progress much harder. Obviously, I haven't got a magic wand. I can't just make it cooler for you. So these are just things you need to be aware of and give yourself some boundaries around. Obviously, if you know that you're more likely to start reaching for treats and reaching for kind of bad food, so to speak, because your appetite control is worse, then you need to make sure you have rules in place and boundaries to make sure that you're not slipping down that slippery slope. And obviously, you need to do what you can to improve or maximize your sleep quality. So that might mean taking a cold shower before bed so that you're reducing your core temperature. Making sure, obviously, you've got the windows open and a fan on, making sure you're hydrated enough. So doing all the things you can to maximize your chances of sleeping well, so that you can maximize your recovery. Obviously, there's only so much you can do, but do be aware that when your sleep suffers, so does your progress. So you need to do everything you can to try and protect your sleep. I would also say it is worth perhaps going to bed a little bit earlier, because if you're going to have poor quality of sleep, you at least want to try and maximize your sleep duration. So don't be compounding bad quality sleep with not much of it. Yeah, and as I mentioned, just things like taking a cool shower, sleeping with a cold water bottle, all these sorts of things. Cool. Do be aware when the temperature is like this, there is the risk of heat stroke or heat illness. Sarah says, I wish I had any say over my sleep. I know. I say it's one of those things I can't wave a magic wand or necessarily fix it for you. But it is just worth being aware that how your sleep will affect your progress and therefore doing what you can to try to improve it as much as possible. Coralie, yeah, has about 10 ice packs in the freezer at any one time. Do be aware that with heat comes all those things, the stress, the dehydration, and therefore be on alert for any dizziness, nausea, confusion. If you stop sweating, these are really important signs to look out for because this could be a warning sign of heat illness, heat stroke. So do not just push through it. Make sure that you are prioritizing your overall health and not just your long-term fitness goals. It may be that you need to reduce the intensity of your training over these next few days until your body has climatized to the heat. As I said, as it says here, heat stroke is a medical emergency, so call for help if necessary. All right. So key takeaways. Obviously, we can't do much to control the heat, but we can take measures to improve our chance of dealing with it. So making sure to eat foods that are high in water and high in electrolytes, like fruit and vegetables. Making sure to pre-hydrate before your exercise, as well as staying hydrated during your exercise. Trying to train earlier in the morning or going to a gym where it's air conditioned. Trying to make sure we are getting a good amount of sleep, even if it's not good quality of sleep. So going to bed a bit earlier if we can, having a cold shower before bed, sleeping with ice packs. Taking electrolytes if necessary, but just being aware that having more electrolytes doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be more hydrated. It's a balancing. You need to make sure you are hydrating yourself as well as taking electrolytes, not just taking more electrolytes and still drinking the same amount, because that won't benefit you. And as I mentioned, if the temperature outside is approaching core temperature, like 37 degrees, and the humidity is high as well, you are not going to be able to cool yourself down. So don't be going for a run out in 37-degree heat at 100% humidity, because your body temperature will rise and it will have no way to dissipate that heat. So make sure to stay in the shade, stay in air-conditioned environments if you are training, and making sure to drink cold drinks, reduce your core temperature as well. Keep an eye on your piss. Make sure your piss is a nice pale yellow. If it is going clear, you're probably overhydrated. And if your piss looks like a pint of English ale, you're probably not hydrated enough. All right, so keeping an eye on that. And drinking to thirst. So drink when you feel thirsty before you go reaching for snacks, because often we can confuse thirst and hunger. I think those are the key takeaways there. Any questions or any thoughts or anything that you have found that works really well for you in this heat to allow you to stay comfortable, to stay on track with your training? Jump in on the group chat. Sarah says, yeah, you've got ice packs at the ready too. I wish I'd had that thought myself because I was absolutely cooking last night. Oh, yeah. Coralie says, wet my sports bra and hair before training. Yeah, it's a good shout. Do just remember if the humidity is maxed out, it doesn't matter how wet you are. If the water can't evaporate, it's not going to cool you down. It might just make you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, putting ice into your water bottle for drinking throughout the day is a really good shout. It is worth remembering as well that a fan doesn't cool the air, it only pushes air across your body. So again, in high humidity, in 100% humidity, a fan won't necessarily cool you down at all. It only works by passing air over your body, and if there is space within that air for the sweat to evaporate off your body, then it will work, but otherwise it won't. So if you are using a fan, make sure it is blowing across your body because it won't actually cool down the environment. It will just cool you down. So a fan just blowing around in the room but not actually blowing on you won't do anything. It doesn't cool the air down at all. Coralie says keeping my feet cool helps as well. Yeah, sticking your feet in cold water. All right, all good stuff. Thanks, guys. Well, my time is up, I'm afraid, so I'm gonna have to shoot off. But if any questions come up, if you're struggling at all in heat, if you're struggling with anything else, make sure to give me a shout. And I look forward to chatting to you soon. All right, gang, have a good one.